Alright, so our characters are both picking up things and adding it to their respective inventories, but we don't really have a way of checking that. So let's fix that today. So in the blueprints folder, I'm going to right click and create a new folder, and this is going to be our HUD elements. This is where all our widgets will go. So the first one we're going to create, right click, user interface, widget blueprint. We'll select this user widget right here, and it is the player HUD underscore widget. And this is the base widget that'll hold our health bar and stuff like that, and everything that we'll build everything else on top of. So we'll double click and open that up, and you'll have a blank empty screen. What we need to add first is a canvas panel. So we have to search it up. It used to come standard, but now it has to be added. So once we have our canvas panel in, let's right click it and wrap it with a scale box. And then one more time with a size box. So we're going to adjust this width and height override to 1920 by 1080. Let me make sure my microphone's plugged in. And then we can start building on top of it. So first thing I'm going to add is our health bar. So this is just so we can put it on screen and see it. We won't actually establish the functionality of it right now, but just to let us have a visual. So I'm going to put it in the top left, anchor to the top left. Size is 300 by 20. And I'm just going to set the percent to full. Fill color and opacity, we'll set that to a red color. And now under the style, I'm going to make this, I'm going to click open the background image and the fill image, and I want to draw this as a rounded box just because I like the way that looks better. Doesn't that look nice? Better than the rectangles, I think. That's all we need for right now. So now what we're going to add is another canvas panel. So we'll add a canvas panel to our canvas panel, canvasception. Anchor it to the right. For the alignment, we want it to be 1 on the X, and what this does is, let me put it at 0 on the X. So right now it's on the left of this little anchor point, but it's because I have it on 1. If I put it to 0, it goes to the right. So since I want it on the left, I put it at 1. Position Y, I'll replace that back down. For the Y, I want it 0.5 so that it's halfway in between. Now for the position X, I'm going to set it to -50 since negative will make it move left. And I want it to be, let's see, 400 by 400 for the size. That looks aight. Alright, with that done, let's add an image to it. So I'm going to anchor this to the full screen. You want to make sure that image is dropped on this canvas panel. I'm going to rename this one so we can keep up with it. This is going to be our inventory panel. Let's call it inventory canvas. So we got this anchored to our inventory canvas. Let's anchor it to the full screen. Already did that. So we'll reset all the offsets to 0. Set the color and opacity to whatever you like. If you got an image you want to use, I'm just going to set it to black and 0.5 on the alpha down here so that it's a little bit transparent. And then I'm going to take this top portion and just pull it up a little bit. So I'm going to set it to about -50. Just because I like a little, this will hold all the items, but this right here is where I'll set the text so that it says inventory or backpack or naps. Oh, we only have 8 inventory slots. Let's make this smaller then. So the inventory, I went RPG mode. This is a survival game mode, so we'll do it smaller. So about 200. That looks decent. Then we can have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we'll add a scroll box so that in case we build better backpacks or whatever. We'll add a text block and anchor it to the center. 0.5 on the X so that it lines up in the middle, and 1 on the Y so that when we reset this position offset back to 0, it sits just a little bit above it. I'm going to set the font to italic. I'm going to set the text to be backpack, why not? Now it's kind of off to the left a little bit, but that's because of the justification. If we align that to the center, then it centers it up. And I'm going to change it so that it's not white. I'm just going to... That looks good. I like that. Now, a handy little trick is you can actually take this color right here and drag it up to this little bar right here where it says drag and drop colors here to save. And now we've got that saved. So we can use it for everything else and it'll match just right. So now we want to add a scroll box so that in case we do upgrade our backpack size, we can actually scroll through what we're holding. We are going to anchor this to the full canvas panel. And we don't got to do anything else with it. But what we need now is a uniform grid panel. And this is going to be our actual inventory. So we'll drop this onto our scroll box. You want to make sure it's parented to the scroll box. And for the horizontal alignment, just align left. You want it to have this just tiny little green square right here. Because if you have this anchored to the full screen, then it tries to fill. So if you have two items, they'll be like here and here instead of just here and here. So this is our inventory panel, and that's why I wanted to rename that canvas. And this one we want to make sure is a variable. Oh, this image right here, click it, make sure it's not a variable. Unless you want to change it for whatever reason, but in the context of this series, we're not going to, so it'll declutter over here if we just have the progress bar on the inventory panel. So alright, so we got our backpack, the inventory panel. Now we need to, over here, we'll use the event construct, but I'm going to delete it and add it back. So right here in the variables, we need to add a player reference so we can get information from the player. This will be a player base object reference that will be instance editable and expose on spawn. So whenever a player opens up this widget, we can feed in which character they are and their inventory and stuff like that. Then we are going to need 3 integers, and these are called row, column, and column length, and this will help us establish the inventory slots. So the row is the up and down, like if you have 2 rows of items, that's the row, and the column is like column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, etc. So when we first create this menu widget, we want to set the row and the column back to 0, because over here we're going to be updating those. So when we first create this, but it's good to go ahead, set those back to 0, get our inventory panel, and clear children from it. Because when we create our inventory buttons that'll represent the items we're holding, we'll add this to the panel as a child. So we clear the children so that they won't be rebuilt on top of it and just stack into perpetuity. So once we've done that, let's get our player reference. We will get the inventory and get the inventory size. So what we're going to do is we're basically going to create a bunch of slots based on how big our inventory is. So we're going to do a for loop. Not a for each loop this time, but a for loop. Now, our inventory array starts at 0 because arrays always start at 0. They go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Our inventory size, however, is going to count from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in order to sync these up, we want our last index to be our inventory size minus 1. You could just set your inventory size to whatever you want it to be minus 1, but I always end up doing it like this. So I don't know if there's a difference. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to create a button at an index, and we're going to get the inventory item at that index to populate that. So in order to do that, we need to create another user interface widget called, we'll call it inventory icon underscore UI. So the way I generally differentiate between things is if it has a W, that's the widget that goes on the full screen, and if it has UI, that is something that's going to be fed into a widget, so like a button that goes on the screen. That's the way I do it. You can do it how you like. This is just showing you how I do it. So inside of here, we will search and add a canvas panel just like we did. Now we don't want this one to be full screen. So instead of fill screen up in the top right, we will do custom on screen. And for the height and width, I'm just going to probably 75. And it gives us a nice little square. We will, however, still be wrapping this. Wrap scale box. Wrap size box. And then the width and height override will be 75 and 75. So now we can add a button to this that we anchor to the full screen, reset the offsets, just like that. And then for the style on the normal, I'm just going to do an image search for a black image texture that's part of the engine resources, because it's got that nice look to it. It'll automatically draw as a rounded box, might draw as an image, but I like the rounded box personally. And then we'll add a text to that. Now the size, well, that's cool, but I'm going to just type in 8 and then justify it to the center, and this is going to be the item name. So item name is variable, button, item button, I hate when that happens. Item button is variable. Should automatically be set, but yeah. Compile that. Ouch. Alright, in the graph, let's do a construct thingy. So we're going to set up some variables. That is item info, which will be an item info struct. Remember, since we're building this based on our inventory, it has to match that, so we'll make that instance editable and expose on spawn. And then we need a player index. That will be the integer, also instance editable and expose on spawn. That way when we click it, we can tell the player index which button we want to use. With the player HUD widget, we can feed in a player reference directly, and that will kind of create a hard reference, but with the icons, we don't want it to have a reference to each one. We can just communicate through interfaces. We really could communicate through interface with this, but that's overly complicated. It's okay to have this one, I think. So now that we have our inventory icon, on the construct, we want to take this item info and establish some style parameters. So we'll grab out our item button, get it, and set style. Now in style, you don't want to just plug this in because they won't match. From the in style, you want to make a style. And from the normal, we will make slate brush. So this is basically how you plug in a texture and then coordinate it to be the style of a button. So from the item info, I'm going to split that open. From the item image, plug that into image. And I'm going to draw it as a rounded box just because I like that look. And I'm going to plug this into the pressed also. So that way when we're when it has its normal look and the pressed look, they look the same. But when it's hovered, we'll add a little bit of a tint so that you can tell which one you're hovering over. So we'll make slate brush again. Plug in the image, and then right here where it says tint, drag off and you'll get make slate color. And then you can just bump this to 1 and then the V to 0.1, and it gives it a nice dark tone when you're hovering your mouse over it. Now for the item name, we'll grab that. Set text. You want this set text with the parentheses text. That way you can feed in the item name. Just like that. Now I am going to default this text block to say none, so that in case it doesn't... Oh, well, it's going to change it either way, so we'll go back and show how to update that later on. Let's go back into our player HUD widget, and then for each item, for each item in our inventory size, we can create widget. We can create our inventory icon. Now, in order to tell it which item info, we want to get a copy of the item info at the index that we're currently building our for loop from. So we'll plug that in. For the player index, just off the player reference, we can player index and plug that in. Then we will get our inventory panel, add child to uniform grid. This is the content that we want to add to it. And here is where that row and column will come in. So we'll plug that in right here and right here. So this is the left and right, this is the up and down. So every time we add an item, we want to move right one, so we need to increment our column. We'll increment, and this will increase it by 1. Now when we increment, we want to see if it's greater than the column length. If we don't establish a column length, they'll just continue moving right, and they'll eventually go off screen. So we want to see if it's greater than or equal to our column length. I don't think we've established what that is yet. I'm going to set that to 4. So column length 4. We'll add a branch with a B and a left click. And then if it is, we want to set it back to 0 so that when we move down, it doesn't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We want it to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we need to move it back to the left. To do that, we will set it back to 0. Now after we do that, we need to increment our row so that the next time it feeds through, it starts on the next one. So we'll increment the row, and it will move down 1. And that's really all it takes. So if we compile, we can go into our player base blueprint, and on begin play, we can create our player HUD widget. So we'll create widget, create widget. It is our player HUD. For the player reference, we'll just feed in a self reference. And now instead of adding to viewport, we want to add to player screen. And in order to tell it who the owning player is, we can get player controller and feed in our player index, just like that. So we will have to do some reformatting of this later on in order to adjust it based on whether we're playing in single player or multiplayer mode. But for right now, let's just set it to half the width override. So instead of 1920, we'll do 1920 divided by 2. And that way it moves all into the middle. So now when we're out here, that looks weird. I don't know why those are rounded. Oh, because I made it draw as rounded. I'm gonna fix that real quick. Let's just do it draw as image. Okay. It's separate things, I promise. But let's add a... So now they each have a backpack. We don't really have a way of showing it. But, you know, they're lining up. So now in our player HUD, we need a way of recalling this thing when we pick stuff up. So let's add a custom event called rebuild inventory. And we'll do this. So when we call this, it feeds through as if we're creating it for the first time. It deletes everything we got, rebuilds it. So on player base, when we pick up an item, at the end of either one of these, we want to get our HUD reference that we did not establish yet. So we'll move this over here. Promote the player HUD widget to a variable called HUD ref. Plug that in, get rid of that, plug that, and then that. So now in our pickup item function, we can get HUD ref, right click, and I want to convert this to a validated get. What a validated get is if you drag off a variable and do an isValid node, it's basically that condensed down into one thing. So it's just this. So I'm going to get rid of both of these print strings and feed both of these into this HUD reference. So if it is valid, I don't know what's going on with my speech today, we can call our rebuild inventory function, and then it'll clear everything out and update with what it's got going on. So if I pick stuff up, oh, it's because I'm dumb. So it looks like it's not adding anything until I actually hover over it. That's stupid. Okay, so it is updating. It's doing fine. That's dumb. Man, it's always something with these things. Did I turn my recording back on? Yes. Alright, so if you need to check to make sure your item thingy is updating, Shift F1 will give you your mouse, and then you can see. So like if I move over here, steak. So it's working. Dumb. But why isn't it a black screen? Why is it changing it to white? It should be defaulting. That's perplexing. Well, I know what we can do. In the inventory icon widget, when we're creating the style of it, let's just see if the item info ID is equal to empty. Branch. If it's not equal to empty, then we want to set it to what this is. But if it is equal to empty, then we'll copy that style button, plug in our item button, and then in make style, from the normal, we can make a slate brush, and then for the image, then we'll add in the black texture. And then from the text, we can set text. Oops, crap. I hope that doesn't open anything. And then in text, we'll just say none. That should help. Yeah, that looks, whoa. And we'll also set that the button is set enabled. And we'll set that to false so that it's not clickable if there's nothing in it. Let's see, sets the current enabled status of the widget. Let's check that. Yeah, there we go. Now it's looking kind of funky still, so let's go into our HUD reference, and in our inventory panel we'll set some slot padding. So we got 75 by 75, so let's do 15 in between each one. That looks good. Maybe not 15 on the bottom. So you can click this little drop down and then specify each side of it. I'm going to do 10 on the left, 10 on the right, 15 on the right, and then 5 on the bottom and 5 on the top. I'll just do 15 on the left too. 15 on the left, 15 on the right, 5 on the top, and 5 on the bottom. And then that looks okay. Maybe 10 from the top. But you know what? That looks good enough. So now when I pick up stuff, it's changing it to the image. And if I jump in with my other character, they each have their own separate inventory. Huzzah. Alright, in the next one we will establish some more, well, we'll go ahead and turn on and off the backpack viewing. So we'll do that in the next one. See y'all soon. Bye.